Okay, good afternoon, everybody. This is the last module of the course on multivariate approaches to microbial communities. This third lesson regards the nonlinear approaches. So, nonlinear approaches are emerging techniques, but they have a history. So the basis of the nonlinear approach are artificial neural networks. They are an abstract simulation of our nervous system, which contains a collection of neurons that communicate with each other through connection called axons. The artificial neural network model bears some resemblance to axons and dendrites in a nervous system. The first model of neural networks was proposed in 1943 by McCulloch and Pitts in terms of a computational model of nerve activity. Then, in the following years, it was followed by other approaches proposed by many other authors. There are two categories of models. The biological-based models aiming to mimic a biological neural system, such as auditory and visual functions. And the objective is testing of assumptions about biological systems. But the one much more applied and used are the application-driven models that is less interested in miming biological function. The architectures are largely conditioned by application needs. So in a biological system, neurons, there are many neurons that have a tree structure called dendrites that receive signals from other neurons through junction called synapses. Some neurons communicate through a few synapses, others have thousands. The application of artificial neural networks are very different and diversified. So we start from pattern classification, clustering, supervised and unsupervised. Today we will go in deep and unsupervised clustering approach. And then function of approximation, prediction, regression, optimization, and of course also control. Let's observe the functioning of a neuron. It's estimated that the human brain contains over 100 billion neurons, and that a neuron can have over 1,000 synapses in and out. Switching time of a few milliseconds, much slower than a logical port, but connectivity hundreds of times higher. A neuron transmits information to other neurons via its axon. The axon transmits electrical impulses, which depends on its potential. Transmitted information may be excitatory or inhibitory. A neuron receives input signals of various kinds, which are summed. If the excitatory influence is predominant, the neuron is activated and generates information messages through the output synapses. Now, let's see the parallel with a structure of a neural network, an artificial neural network. An artificial neural network consists of a set of nodes, that means the neurons, of units connected by links. A set of weight associated with links, and a set of threshold values or activation levels. The design of a neural network requires choosing the number and type of units, the determination of the morphological structure, coding and training examples in terms of networking inputs and outputs, the initialization and training of weights on interconnection through the training set. So, which kind of problem we can solve with neural networks? First of all, let's start with the characteristic of the networks. Instances are represented by many features and many values, over even real ones, of course. So it means the variables that we would like to analyze. The target function can be at real values. So in general, we have one y the dependent variables that could be quantitative, so a non-linear regression, or qualitative, so a classification, a sort of choosing, as we saw the first day, classifying between one, two, or more classes. The example can be noisy, so can be affected by environmental noise. The training time can be long, even very, very long. Sometimes it employs days to perform a training. The evaluation of the training network must be able to be carried out quickly. It's crucial to understand this. It is not crucial to understand the semantic of the expected function. So for this reason, artificial neural networks are also called a black box. So from a statistical point of view, it is unclear which is the internal functioning of the network. But otherwise, in some cases, when we have nonlinear cases, it works, and so could be applied. Many different kinds of applications, from robotics to image understanding, biological systems, also, of course, financial predictions. The input is a matrix of quantitative or qualitative variable, and the output could be quantitative, so prediction, regression, or qualitative, a classification. And it is better if expressed as dummy, but it depends from the kind of statistical tool we use. Overfitting, so such as all supervised models, also neural networks tends to overfitting. And to avoid overfitting, there are robustness strategies, such as partitioning. That means to split the whole data set into training, validation, and test, or have an external test, completely independent test. In general, for example, I used to split a data set into 50% for training, 25 for validation, and 25 for test. So, as yesterday we internally observe an analysis of variance, studying the basic brick of the wall, that is the sum of squares. Here in a neural network, the basic brick is the perceptron. The perceptron is the core of a neural network. It was born from an idea of Rosenblatt on 1962. It tried to simulate the functioning of a single neuron. Now we will analyze, but very, very briefly, do not worry, the architecture of a perceptron, so of this neuron inside a network. So the output values are booleans, 1, 0, or 1. The input and weights, x and w, are real values, positives or negatives. We have three elements: inputs, sum, and threshold. The training consists in selecting weight and threshold. So this is the input layer. Here we have the perceptron here, where we have to choose which weight are right using a training. We have to choose which weight for each input and the threshold values in order to reply to the final request, so to predict the dependent variable. Here is the input function. We will see this later. And this is the activation function. So this is a error here. Activation function. The activation function could be in a different way. So we have to choose also the threshold. We could classify the activation functions into three. So a step function in this way, 0, 1, etc., or a sign function, -1 or 1. Or in case of a regression, artificial neural network for regression, we have a sigmoid. This is the schematic diagram of an artificial neural network. So it is fundamental to have an input layer. Each of these nodes are a variable. One, two, or more hidden layers, neurons, that are hidden in this part of the neural networks. We have to decide how many layers, how many nodes within the layers. In general, it's much more common to use one or at least two layers. Neural networks with more than two layers are very complicated and also difficult to be trained. And of course, the output layer that in general is one. So we have one dependent variable that could be quantitative, if a regression, or qualitative, if we need a classification. So let's introduce some definitions. So I wrote here the definition of this parameter, of these parameters, but also the typical values that could be used. For example, the learning rate is the training parameters that controls the size of weights and bias changes during learning. So the learning rate in general could start from 0.3. Then we have the momentum. Momentum simply adds a fraction m of the previous weight, update the current one. So give a sort of movement to move the previous weight to another kind of weight, trying to find a solution which is better and more stable. The momentum parameter is used to prevent the system to converge to a local minimum. So imagine a flat plane where you have a hole. If your results is inside a hole, you have to move this result from the hole, applying a momentum that move these results over this hole and continue to a better and more stable point. A high momentum parameter, but can also help to increase the speed of convergence of the system if there is a point of convergence. However, setting the momentum parameter too high can create a risk of overshooting the minimum, which can cause the system to become very, very, very unstable. So take care of the value of the input value of the momentum. The momentum coefficient that is too low cannot reliably avoid the local minimums, so jump from the hole, and can also slow down the training of the system. It because it found many local minimum if the momentum is too small, it doesn't jump the local minimum. Then we have the epoch, determines when the training will stop once the number of iterations exceeds epochs. When training by minimum error, this represents the maximum number of iterations. So it should be quite high, but not too high. It is also linked to the minimum error. That is the minimum mean square error of the epochs, square root of the sum of square differences between the network targets and actual outputs divided by the number of patterns, only for training by minimum error. Let's start with a first very easy example. So this example use fat and salt contact to predict the consumer acceptance of a cheese. So we can start here. So we have 6 persons or 1 person with 6 different cheese. The cheese have different score of fat and salt. And here we have the acceptance. 1 if the consumer accept these values, and 0 if they do not accept. So here we can see that low values of fat is not accepted, but if the fat is low, is small, but the salt is high, it could be accepted. So this is the general rule. The general rule. How to train this artificial neural network? Sorry. Okay. In that way. So here we have the 2 input layers, fat and salt. So this column and this column. Here we have the hidden layer, 1 hidden layer with 3 nodes inside. So 1, 2 input layer, 3, 4, 5 hidden layers, and 1 output layer. That is the consumer acceptance. This column here. This is the dependent variable. In this case, qualitative. For the input layer, we have, for example, for the record 1, the fat input is 0.2, the salt input is 0.9. Output of input layer is equal to input into the hidden layer. In this example, hidden layers has 3 nodes. Each node receives an input, as input the output of all the input nodes. Output of each hidden node is a function of the weighted sum of inputs. Let's see the graphic here. So we have the input of fat, the input of salt. This input goes to the with these arrows to the 3 nodes of the hidden layer, and will be multiplied by a weight that we have to define. And there is a known term that could be input. From the hidden layer, the output arrives to the consumer acceptance, so the output layer, even in this case multiplying by a weight and a known term, and expressing the consumer acceptance. So, if there are any questions, please stop me and feel free to ask. Where we are. So here is the input layer, the hidden layer. This is the output of the hidden layer node. This is the function here, and the weights theta and w are typically initialized to random values in the range of minus 0.005 to plus 0.05, equivalent to a model with a random prediction. These initial weights are used in the first round of the training. So it starts from this side. And then the artificial neural network model change those values recursively in order to modify the results and find the best model which fit the output. So this is a supervised approach. For example, the output tree is, this is the general formula. Here we have the known term plus 0.05, that is the weight from the fat, plus 0.05, that is the weight to be multiplied for the salt. And this is the result, 0.43. So these are the weights, these are the values, the initial values of the first observation. This is the known term, theta. These are the weights. And these are the results after passing the hidden layer, so 0.43. The output layer. The output layer is based with the same shape of formula, but this value is the theta, so the known term for the output layer. And these are the weights, 0.01, 0.05, and 0.015, multiplied by the results of the three hidden layers. So this is the weights, this is the known term, and this is the value from the hidden layer. Okay. And this is the final result, 0.506. Oops. What does it mean that the output is 0.506 if the cutoff at 1 is 0.5, we classify it as 1 because this value is higher than 0.5. And so this is accepted in that case. Sorry. Okay. Which is the relation of this artificial neural network, which is a non-linear approach to linear regression. So a net with a single output node and no hidden layers, so without all of these parts. So we have only this and this, input and output, without the hidden layer. So a net with a single output node and no hidden layers, where G is the identity function, takes the same form as a linear regression model. So the difference between a neural network and a linear regression model is the hidden layer. We have many different, in a few minutes we will back to the example. So we have many different types of neural networks. So in general, there are two species we could call species. So the feed-forward networks, which goes from the input to the output, so one way, feed-forward, or the recurrent feedback networks. So these networks within the hidden layers could be from one side or also can go from the other side. This is very complicated and very hard to be trained, but also in some cases, very good for prediction. Then we have a single layer perceptron as the one that we are using in the example, or multi-layer perceptron, or other different kind. So here coordinates sum, self-organizing map, are the one that we will go in deep today, next next half an hour. Okay, let's have a look to the structure of a neural network. So, why a neural network solve nonlinear problems? What does it mean? It means that if we have this kind of problem, a linear approach could not well classify the black and the white. Also, an easy structure of a neural network does not work well. Much better than a linear approach, but not so well. For example, here, a three-layer artificial neural network could perfectly solve this problem. That is unsolvable with a linear approach. So this is to explain graphically the difference between a linear problem and a non-linear problem. And it is hard to understand if the problem that we are projecting to solve is linear or not linear. So we have to try. I suggest to try in parallel both linear and non-linear models. If the results are similar, I suggest to use linear approaches because they are easily to be understandable and they are not black boxes. But if the performance of a nonlinear approach is higher, of course, it is better to use those kind of approaches. Before to arrive to the end of our example, which is we have to introduce the theorem of the convergence of the perceptron that is introduced by Rosenblatt on 1962. This theorem ensures that the perceptron will be able to delimit the two classes if the system is linearly separable. In other words, in optimization, there are no local minimums. Problem, but how to behave in case of nonlinear problem solution? The solution are two, in general two. So we can use the gradient descent delta rule instead of the training rule of the perceptron, or use a multi-layer feed-forward and recursive networks. Let's see in more detail and maybe in a clearer way. So this is the gradient descent way. And the purpose of this gradient descent is that the standard gradient descent could be very slow in converging to a local minimum. So the model continue to find, to search for local minimum, also always with a lower value, given with a lower error. Given the error measure A, there is only one overall minimum if we use a single unit. If you use more units to reduce the chance of converging to a local minimum, we have to minimize the measure of error. This is the second solution. So the multi-layer feed-forward networks, which is each unit is connected only to the next layer without going back. Processing proceeds smoothly from input units to output units. There is no feedback. Do not have an inner layer. In this case, we want to learn nonlinear decision areas here, so this is quite difficult. The third solution is much more complicated, is a recursive networks. In a recursive networks, they are much more similar to functioning in the human brain because they simulate a backward connection. The connection can form arbitrary configuration. Activation is rerun back to the units that caused it. Have an internal state, an activation level to be activated or not. A less order computation, but is very unstable. So it requires more time to calculate a stable state. And find difficulties in learning. It implements more complex agents, and here we have a couple of examples. Let me introduce the learning using a backpropagation algorithm. This is fundamental. Most of the models, the easier that we can use this backpropagation algorithm that aims to starting from a set of perceptron with the random weights, such as the one that we have already used. It learns quickly, and so it's very useful for this reason, have the ability to generalize the result, and have large scale set of perceptrons. Here is an example of backpropagation. So as before, an input layer, or one or more hidden layers, and an output layers, in this case, 2 outputs. So in the example, all weights are being updated. The second example of the epoch is considered. It recalculates the input and the output of all nodes, recalculating error on nodes. The weights are rearranged. The unit is run out the epoch. It repeats for n epochs. And so this is a cycle. Which is the condition of termination? When this training operation stops. The process continues until the epochs are terminated. Then it starts again. When to stop processing? When the error is minimum. So we can set a value for the minimal error to be reached, for example. It is preferred to minimize the error on a test set, not on the initial model, on the training, but on a test set. So in every cycle, we have a solution on a test set, then it works on a validation set, extract the error, calculate the error, and then go back again and continue the cycles. Sorry. Where we are. Okay. Here is the plot of the error on a test set T. So, of course, increasing the number of epochs, the error tends to decrease. Does the algorithm converges to a stable solution? This is the problem of the gradient algorithm. So it can stop on local minimum, so without go outside the hole. A local minimum can give solution far worse than the global minimum. There can be many local minima. So the possible solution is to train the network with different starting weights, train different different networks architectures. So we have to try. Let's come back to the example of the cheese. So if you remember, here we have the values of fat and salt. Here, the weights for each assessed for each connection to the hidden layer, and then also the weights for the connection to the output layer. And we have also, of course, the known term. Here is the final solution, so the final weight. Here is the input layer, the node, the weights, and the bias node here. And Here is the input, the output, and the prediction. The prediction, of course, here doesn't work because we would like to have 1 0 0 0 1 1, and it is not right. How to avoid overfitting? Because I can remember you that this is in these terms, this is a supervised approach. So to avoid overfitting, we have to track error in validation data. So split, partition the data set into training, validation, and test, and also better to use also an external test set. So limit the iteration in order to avoid to reach a performance completely adapted to the train, and also, of course, limit the complexity of the network. Which kind of decision we have to do? So we have to decide the number of hidden layers. It is most popular to use one hidden layer if the problem is not too complicated. It is easier. It is better to find to use easier architectures. And then we have to choose the number of nodes in the hidden layer or layers. More nodes capture complexity, but increase chances of overfitting. So in general, that is just a very, very general suggestion. You can use a number of hidden layers much higher than the input layer. Not so much higher. So if we have two input layer, we can use 2, 3, or 4, or at least 5 nodes in the hidden layer. Then the number of the output nodes for classification, 1 node per class. For numerical, of course, only one. The learning rate, other two terminology, the learning rate, low values downweight the new information from errors at each iteration. This slow learning, but reduces the tendency to overfit to local structure. So better to be slower, but in this way we avoid overfitting. What about momentum? High values keep weights changing in the same direction as previous iteration. Likewise, this helps avoiding overfitting to local structure, but also slow learning. The same rule for learning rate. Some software automates the optimal selection of the input parameters, so the number of layers, but much more on the number of nodes. Some practical consideration. The choice of starting weights has a great impact on the problem of convergence. If the size of the input vector is n and n is large, a good heuristic is choosing the initial weights between minus 1 divided per n and 1 divided per n. The backpropagation algorithm is very sensitive to the learning factor n. If it is not large, the network diverges. Sometimes it is preferable to use different values of n for different layers of the network. The choice of encoding mode and network architecture can drastically affect the performance. So you have to try also different performances. The experience, of course, will help you. So, in conclusion, for this introduction, general introduction to artificial neural networks, and more in general to nonlinear approach, the optimal structure of the network like all statistical models, neural networks are also subject to overfitting. In this case, the overfitting can be caused by an inefficient network structure, too small or too large. There is no good theory for characterizing function that can be efficiently represented through networks. A possible response is represented by genetic algorithms, but we do not go in deep with this. We do not have time. So what about the expressivity? Do not have the expressive power of a logical representation, such as a decision tree, but can represent all Boolean function exactly, continuous function approximately, and arbitrary functions also in this case approximately. They are suitable to represent function for continuous input and outputs, and are suitable for function for which the interactions between inputs are not intricate and the output varies gradually as the input varies. Well-tolerated noise is very, very efficient in this case. The computational efficiency, what about that? For m examples and weight, each epoch can take a time, so it's not very well efficient in terms of times. Transparency, this is the very bad news for artificial neural networks, because neural networks are black boxes. They have no semantics. The advantage is that sometimes they have good predictive ability, can capture complex relationships, and do not need to specify a model. The disadvantages is that it's considered a black box, as we said before. No variable selection mechanism, so you have to exercise care in selecting variables prior to perform an artificial neural network model. It's heavy computational requirements if there are many variables. So it is also important to have a performing hardware. So this preliminary part for me is completed. Is there any questions on this? Are you already alive? Okay. Simone? No.
No.
Okay. Alessandra?
We are here. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
It's not immediate for people who is not friendly with this kind of tools. So probably by visualizing an exercise or similar, probably is easier to go in depth with this kind of approach that is strongly different from the canonical one.
The usual one, of course, but we need this introduction. As yesterday we made a long introduction on ANOVA to arrive to MANOVA, to multivariate analysis of variance. Here, this is a quite deep introduction, but just to arrive to the self-organizing maps. So
yes.
It serves just for this. So
thank you.
Let's go to the next part of this module. So the self-organizing maps. Okay. So self-organizing maps are neural networks that employ unsupervised learning methods.
Sorry, Corrado, we don't see the presentation.
I didn't. I stopped sharing my screen.
Thank you.
Thank you for telling me this. Okay. Okay. Can you see the screen?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So self-organizing maps are neural networks that employ unsupervised learning methods mapping their weights. So you remember the weight in the example of the cheese, mapping their weights to conform to the given input data with the goal of representing multidimensional data in an easier and understandable form for the human eye. So it is a sort of a PCA in a non-linear world. So we can map the variability, the variation due to the input of the observation and of the variable. So self-organizing map nets group similar input vectors together without the use of target vectors. So it is unsupervised. Only input vectors are given to the network during the training. The learning algorithm then modifies the network's weights so that similar input vectors produce the same output vector. Unsupervised training is good for finding hidden structures or features within a set of patterns. So we can use self-organizing map for an exploratory aim. If we do not have an applicative purpose, so we do not want to have a model to classify the consumer acceptance, like the cheese, or to forecast a quantitative variable, but we would like just to have an overview of my data from a nonlinear approach, unsupervised and nonlinear. The network is allowed to cluster without being biased towards looking for a predefined output or classification. When the networks learn is entirely data-driven. After learning, it is often necessary to examine what the clusters of output units have come to mean. The self-organizing maps has been introduced by Professor Kohonen in 1982. In fact, it is also known as Kohonen feature map. They are unsupervised neural networks, clustering a tool for high-dimensional and complex data. It maintains the topology of the dataset without altering. Training occurs via competition between neurons. It is impossible to assign network nodes to specific input classes in advance, so it's completely unsupervised. Can be used for detecting similarities and degrees of similarities, and it assumes that input patterns fall into sufficiently large distinct groupings. Random weights vectors initialization. So this is a structure of a map, a self-organizing map. It could be two-dimensional or one-dimensional. It is more common this kind of pattern, so of map. Each grid point represents an output node. Okay, so the input node are the variables. The output node are each of the grid points. The grid is initialized with random vectors, and then training it assesses we'll see what self-organizing map do. Okay, so there are three main ways in which a self-organizing map is different from a standard artificial neural network. A self-organizing map is not a series of layers, but typically a 2D grid of two-dimensional grid of neurons. They do not learn by error correcting. They implement something called competitive learning. They deal with unsupervised machine learning problems. Competitive learning is the case of self-organizing map, refers to the fact that when an input is presented to the network, only one of the neurons in the grid will be activated. In a way, the neurons on the grid compete for each input. The unsupervised aspect of SOM refers to the idea that you present your inputs to it without associating them with an output. Instead, a self-organizing map used to find structure in your data. This is the main characteristic of a self-organizing map. You want to explore the structure of your data in a very efficient but also effective way. We will go in deep about that. So, which are the steps? How does it work? Initialize each node's weight vector, A, with a random real number. Take a random input vector from the training data set and feed into the input layer. Every node in the network is examined to calculate which one's weights are most likely the input vector. The winning node is commonly known as best matching unit, BMU. Determine the neighborhood radius of BMU, diminishing each iteration. Reward the nodes by adjusting weight vectors A of each node with the neighborhood determined in the step 4. And then go back, return to step 2, and repeat the procedure n times. This is an example. So this is the geometric relationship between image points indicating similarity. Each neuron contains a weight vector. Example, this is an example of an RGB value. So each of these nodes is the combination of R, G, and B. So this is high value of red and low values of G and B. This is low value of B and R and high value of green, etc., etc. This is the sample data. These are the weights, and then we have the output nodes. So this is a real example. So we initialize the map for t from 0 to 1, select the sample, get the best matching unit, scale the neighbors, increase t a small amount, and so and this cycle. Here we have an example with a random, so random configuration in this map. Here is with 100 iterations. You can see the shape. This is values of R, G, and B. So here we have this shape, and here we have this other shape. 1,000 and 10,000. So what about to get the best matching unit? Any method for vector instances, so the nearest neighbor, the farthest neighbor, different kind of methods. The most common used method is the Euclidean distance. The advantages of self-organizing map is that data mapping is easily interpreted. It's capable of organizing large, complex data sets. The disadvantages is difficult to determine what input weights to use, but the algorithm do this choice for you. Mapping can result in divided clusters, of course. Requires the nearby points behave similarly. This is an example of a phonetic typewriter. So from a phonetic point of view, you have this distinction. So A here, A with H, M, that is similar to A, R, H, and here is S, K, H here. Okay. Another example, this is 4 maps considering the age of users. So from the blue is 25, the red, the deep red is 50. So here we have the younger, older. As children, of course, here, when we are young, there is a lower probability to have children. And here, the probability is higher when you are 50. Looking for marriage is lower here, even if with the problem for separation of other, but of course is higher here. Or they want children. Of course, when you are young, you want much more children than when you are older. Okay, and so you can put these 4 layers one to another and interpret the results easily. This is an example of countries organized on a self-organizing map based on indicators related to poverty. So here is the map of the world, the label for the countries. Here we have the richest country here, Europe. Here we have Canada and USA. And here we have the poorer country, the Africans, but also Southern Asia, etc. So with the map, you can look the similarities and also clustering, but also there is another layer, the layer of interpretation that is based on the variable. So there is an example of the variables. Sorry. Okay. Here is another practical example. This is a test chemicals for the TOX21 library, were arranged in the 651 clusters based on structural similarity of these chemical components. Compared with the library, overall enriched clusters show above average evidence of harming mitochondria, reflected as a decrease of MMP. Identifying the structural features associated with the decrease of MMP allows researchers to choose appropriate candidate chemicals for further research. So they can identify in which part, so which chemical candidate are good to be further studied. Another example, so this is an example of parasitized samples in the warm season. And so here we have the season, here, the parasites, if exist or non-exist, and it depends on the length, on the weight, on the number of parasites, and we can look why, in which case we have the parasites. Okay, another little step toward the application. So now we will start really with the application. Is there any question right now?
No, Corrado, thank you.
No, okay. So let's go ahead and I sent you on the chat the link of this of my presentation and exercises. So please download it. And inside the folder, we can see it together. We have, apart the PDF of the presentation, we have the input file, the CSV file, but also the codes of to use R. So you have to install or to have installed R on your computer. We do not have time to install, otherwise from the CRAN R project, you can download the last version of R. You have to download the the library Kohonen, and then we go inside the code step by step, observing what it does. So you have this code, and you can adapt to your example if you want to use it, but in R. Okay, let's start. I close this one.
Sorry,
Yes.
Corrado, I have tried to download the set of files that you sent us, but I realized that in your pack you have more. For example, I didn't receive the PowerPoint files. It is a problem of the.
I sent you also only the PDF.
Okay.
The PowerPoint. You have
okay.
All but the PowerPoint.
Perfect. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. So, but the PDF are the same of the PowerPoint. So I just
Yes. Okay. Are the same presentation and not different. Okay. Not different information.
Absolutely, yes.
Thank you.
Okay. So let's start with the last presentation for today. Okay. So first of all, you have to, of course, install R, and inside R, I don't know if you know R, but inside libraries, you can install here. You can choose a mirror. I choose an Italian one. Okay. And here is all the packages for R. You have to look for Kohonen. JK. Sorry. Kohonen. Here we are. Kohonen. I've also installed, so you have to install Kohonen, and this is the basic step to follow me using R together. Okay. Okay. So let's go with. Okay, so if you have installed R and installed also the library Kohonen, let's see which kind of input data set. If you know R, you can use whatever kind of input, but following the example that I'm giving to you, the input file should be a CSV, comma separated, is important. The last column is the one with the categorical variable that is used just for an observation. It's not used as a supervised clustering, but it's just to plot the label considering the quantitative variable that you want to observe. Okay, I suggest 1 or 2 digits for this last, for the observation in this last column. And also you have to sort the data set by the last column, so the categorical variable, in order to have the classes one next to the other. This is the basis to use properly my code. Okay, this code has been given me by Professor Scardi from the University of Tor Vergata. I thank him for giving me this code, and I adapted for this lesson. So first step, we have to load the library Kohonen and input the file CSV. Remember that in R we have this kind of slash instead of this kind. So this is the I am opening the co-onen demo 05A focus 1. So you can open with the notepad this code in order to copy and paste step by step into R. So now we can copy with this code. Maybe I can okay, so that you can read better. Okay. So from here, this is the definition of the color palette. It doesn't. We set the seed, the initial seed. They are 100, and here is the read the CSV file. So this kind of slash. This is where is the file in my PC. Copy. Go into R. Okay. To get the CSV. Okay, let's go ahead. So let's see which kind of data set we are using. So let's open this focus one man as management. So this is the file we would like to analyze. Okay, so. Okay, so we have in an Excel format. So we have a lot of quantitative variables. So we have chemical, environmental, biological, so macro and microfauna, but also the diversity indexes of the flora. And the last column is management method. So is intensive or organic. EO. One letter to select. It is better to use one or at least two digits because those labels are the ones used to create the graph. So if we have many letters, it could not be readable for the readers. Okay, so this is the data set. We have 34 quantitative variables. This is the list. The categorical variable is integrated versus organic, and 54 observations. Okay, just to know. We have to standardize the matrix, so all columns except the last, so 34 columns in this case. This is the code. So here we have 35 columns. We have to use 34 because the last column should not be normalized. So from here, you can see from 1 to the 34. Okay. Copy and paste. Okay. No output until now. Go ahead. We have, this is very important, we have to define the grid shape. So in general, we use a square, rectangular shape where each node of the structure is a node of the grid or the map. The number, the shape of the map depends on the number of cases and the variability of the data set. You have to try sometimes or many times, but the general, but very, very general rule is to have new or few empty cells. So you can try with different dimensions. Here I reported, I comment 3 and I left just this. So this is a 4x4 hexagonal grid, 4x4. You can have a 10x8, but also you can modify this 15x12, whatever. The shape of the topography, you have different kind of shape. I use always hexagonal, even if they seem to be circle, but they are hexagons. Okay. This is the code, so we can copy from this to this. Okay. We have defined the 4x4 map. Let's go ahead. We have to train the sum. So this is an automatic procedure. We do not have to decide quite anything. So we could extract the plot of the training progress as a mean distance to the closest self-organizing map unit. Of course, it tends to have the lower value of the mean distance between units. Okay. So this part is training and also plot. See some changes. Okay. No, I didn't copy. Okay, and this is the graph. We could copy as bitmap and paste wherever, or save as meta file or whatever. Okay, this is the first graph that we extract. Okay, let's go ahead. We have to plot showing the values associated to each sum unit. If we have few variables in the data set, a star plot is reported in each cell. So instead of this, that seems to be a sort of a signal, but in reality, these are the values of each of the 34 variables. So if you have 5 or 6 variables, you find a radar plot, a star plot. Okay. And you can observe the where the variables are positioned. Okay, this is the code. Copy. Okay, the code plot. Here the code open a to plot, so you have this and the next graph together, but just to show you in a larger way, I plot each single plot by itself. Okay, next step. We have to identify and label the classes. So where the observation labeled labeled as the last variable are positioned. So in that way, we have to count the variable, the number of cases of the first group. So here we have 22 for I and 32 for O. In fact, here we write I 22 and O 32, so that we start with I 22 times and then with O 32 times. For this reason, you have to sort the initial data set by the last column of the qualitative variable. Okay, so in that part of the code, we assign labels to each observation, and in the second part, we plot on the map the observation labeled as assigned before. Okay. Okay, so we can see that we have some empty cells. So in that case, we could try also to reduce the number of the grid. If you want, we can do this. But otherwise, we can observe a quite good way of unsupervised clustering from the classes organic and integrate. So on the upper part, we have organic. In the lower part, we have integrated. Then we could choose to extract the count plot. So the number of patterns with the same BMU is shown as a white minimum to red maximum color. So this is the number of objects inside each cell. Okay, so this is the third plot. Is not very used, but it could be useful just to observe also if there are empty plots, there are gray. And so to decide the number of lines and columns of the map. Okay, so here we are. From 0 to 10, here is the maximum, 10. And we can also, if we plot again the second, we can see that here we have many observations. Okay. Here there are some O inside E, but it could happen, of course. It's not a perfect classification, but quite good. Okay, so what next? If you have any questions, if you want that I go slower because you are working with R and you have to stop, please stop me. So the fourth plot is the neighbor distance plot. That is the average distance to the neighboring unit that is shown as white to red maximum color. Okay. This is the code for the fourth. Okay. And this is the neighbor plot. Let's go ahead. We can find useful to obtain this information, but using different plots. So in case you have not only two, but much more than 2, 3, 4, 5 that partially overlaps, to better visualize each group within the map, this is the code that helps you in this operation. The procedure is similar. You have to write here, so you did two plots, but the first with the label with I and none for O, and the second labeling O and nothing for I. Okay, so we have the two plots all together from here. We can plot here. Oh no, I didn't do it. It's, okay. We have to do, sorry. Oh, okay. Just a moment. Okay, this is the second, and this is the first. Okay, we have both here. Okay, so I is positioned here and O is positioned there. There is a partial overlapping here, but this part is for I and this part is only for O. It serves later. Let's see. Okay. No, this is the same. Okay. Okay. What about the variable? Because one of the most useful tool of the self-organizing map is to observe not only where the observation are positioned at I and O, considering the unsupervised clustering, but I would say above all, where the variable are positioned within the map, so that sorry, we can find a correspondence between the observation labeled with the two groups in this case and each single variable. So this is the code. Okay. And where is it? Plot. Okay, it should be until here. Okay. Okay, for example, we have to remember this original, this is the positioning of the observation. Here we have the organic, here we have the integrated. So we could observe which variable is much more associated, so have a reddish value in the position of integrated or organic. For example, this one is red here, so here, but also here. So it is not related specifically to integrated or organic. For example, maybe, yes, this one, arthropods, is mainly related to organic. But also this one, clay, here, and also this one, calcium, B, maybe also K here, and also, no, this is not. Well, what about the other part? Maybe maybe this one could be temperature, seasonality could be, but not so well defined. And so you can associate the position of the observation clustered into the classes with each of the variables. Okay. Any question on this? Okay, let's go ahead. Then this code allows you also to extract two different kinds of classification. The hierarchical classification, and showing you the clusters that you using the hierarchical classification that he decided to position, and also the same with the variables expressed in this way. And there is also the possibility to extract the same approach, but using a different algorithm, so a k-means classification plot. Let's see the code. Okay, so it was from cluster 2. Where is it? Okay, from here we have the hierarchical clustering. Sorry, here. Why? It doesn't work. I do it again. Or maybe because I didn't, I have to copy from here. Okay, copy. Here we are. The hierarchical classification here. It doesn't work as we wish, but this is an unsupervised, so we found here this threshold. Okay. And then we can apply, the code is here, the k-means clustering. So here is the definition. It is not good for our purpose, but we can observe something. Okay, now if you want, we can try with the other two data sets. Okay, so we can open this focus tool. Let's see which kind of information we have here. Okay. Okay. So here we have 26 variables, environmental, chemical, but also we have nematodes, I believe, and also the diversity in indexes. The environmental zone is the classification variable, and we have 106 observations. So this is the data set. Okay. Let's open the code here. Okay. We can, first of all, input just a moment. This one. Okay. Okay, it's working. Couldn't find the file. Okay. This. I have to change the path. Right. Okay, it works. So, okay, now we can rapidly obtain the grid, train the self-organizing map. Okay, then we can plot the training. Here we are. Okay. These are the classes here. So C43, then D13, L15, M26, and T9. Okay. Then the second, and the fourth. Okay. Okay. So we can see here the C, I believe it means continental. Then we have the, can't remember, Lusitanian, etc., etc. So the clusters are quite well distributed. So we have L here, C here, D here, T here, but also here with our L and M here. We have few empty cells, so it's quite good. And we can go ahead with the okay. This is the way of better observing with respect to this graph here. Here we can observe each group separately. So C is here, D is here, L is here, but with T. So L and T are quite overlapped, and N is here. So we have to remember this one. Then we have to plot the variable. Okay, copy. So if we put this here and observe each of the variables, So this is mainly here and here, so for C and L, so it's not characteristic of just one, while this one is for C and L, also this is not characteristics. Here we have the L, mainly L here, A and F, AMOA C here, R AMOA maybe M here, but also it's quite good here, etc. So for each variable you have the position. So for example, this G is C, characterized by C. M is characterized by clay, etc. So you can observe the position of the grouping variable. If they are well separated, so it's good for your purpose. And then you can observe why there is this positioning on the map. And it's caused by, of course, the variables. Is in general similar to the approach that we observed with the ordination techniques. And you can observe all the variables and decide which one is more related with the grouping variables with the level of each of the factor that you decided to study. In this case, the environment. Okay, let's go ahead with the code. We can run the hierarchical clustering. Here it is. So it's M is quite well divided. The C not so well, but however, it doesn't work very well. And then let's try to see if with k-means clustering it works better. Okay. And this is k-means clustering. Also, in this case, there is not a good apart L, but no, nor L, because it's divided into M, maybe, yes. Okay. Let's see the last example. So focus tree is another kind of database. Okay, so we have 33 variables, chemical, I can't remember what is this kind of variable here, but also environment, fauna, and also diversity indexes to assess the condition. So is in field or greenhouse. Let's see if there is some association between the variable and this grouping variable condition. So the code is yes, the code is the third one here, focus tree. I have to modify the path. Okay. Okay. So we can start with train and first plot also. Okay. Okay. can close all the old graph. Okay, and start again here. This is the plot of the training progress. You can also run the code all together, but we are doing this step by step just to observe which is happening, what is happening. Okay, so the first flow for plots. So here we have the codes. We have the no, there's a problem with the so we have C, M, and T. Now we have to modify this code because we would like to observe this one, F. This online, so you can see how to do, what to do. So F is 37 and G is 10. Okay. Okay. So from here to okay. From here to here. Copy. Okay. Here we are. So F is in general here maybe, but overlapping with G. I believe this is not the proper code, so maybe it's not so good. Sorry about that. Focus 3 zone. Focus 3 cond. Focus 3. Let's start over. Okay. Okay, yes, here we are. So here we have the G, and all around we have the F. This is correct. Okay. So let's go ahead. We have to structure to observe where are the F and G separately in that way. So we have 37 and 10. 37 F, 37 and nothing 10. And we have to erase this because we have only two classes. Here we have 37 and G 10. Okay. This is right. Okay. Doable 2. Okay. Copy here. Okay, so G is here and F is here. Okay. Okay. Then we can perform the variables positioning. Okay. Copy. Let's observe the results. So here we have a lot of variables. Here and okay. So what is associated with G? Maybe this, but we have also a red here, so this one, not only this one. Okay. Maybe these or is there anybody who see which is exclusively associated with G? Maybe nothing so in particular. Maybe these a little bit.
Nothing.
No, but there is something with absolutely deep blue here. So K is associated with F, but also deep blue is Mg, P, deep blue here, the mean annual precipitation is not. K and F, of course, AMO-A, maybe, NIRC, and that's it. So this is the way of interpreting the variable, considering the clustering, the unsupervised clustering. Now we can go ahead with this is the hierarchical clustering. Doesn't work well with considering our purposes. And also this, I have to set 2 clusters, but doesn't matter. So I can modify the code here. Clusters equal to. Let's run again. Okay. No, it doesn't work good, but they converge one to another. The way of clustering is the same. So I suppose that today we go deep with this tool that, in my opinion, is a very interesting tool just to observe and visualize with an unsupervised clustering your data and observe the relationship between the clustering variable and the quantitative variables that describe the data set. So if there are any questions, I'm here. Otherwise, I say you hello and happy to be with you these 3 days and see you on the next Excalibur meeting or wherever. Any questions? No?
No, I have only to solve, I'm Alessandra, I am only to solve the problem of the installation of the R, because I have some difficulties in, I zip the file, but my PC does not allow me to install the application, so I have to verify if there is some constraints in security. Yes.
A software hardware problem, so
yes,
it's related to your hardware maybe, but R is very
yes,
complicated software, so
yes,
you will find someone that could help you.
yes, in fact.
Okay. Otherwise, the code is there. You can play with the code. It's quite easier. I left you the presentation specifically on the code so that you can modify it in a way.
See, the important is to be confident with the mode of inserting information in order to correctly insert the code, and then probably it is quite easy when routinely applied.
Okay. So, however, this course is finished, but I'm here. So, if you have problems of any kind regarding this or other statistics problems, I can try to solve with you or to give suggestions as you wish. I'm are available about that.
Thank you so much again.
Okay, so thank you to everybody for listening me. You are very patient, and take care, and see you next time.
See you. See you. Thank you so much.
See you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Have a nice weekend.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Have a nice weekend.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.